Okay, for today's review, we did review yesterday graphs, so make sure you guys are good with graphs because we're going to have those on the test. But we're also going to have the main range, and we're going to have interest, compound interest, as well as solving for when the variable's in the exponent. We call that solving exponential equation. So let's take a look at domain and range. So I even mentioned when I covered this like last week, I said, one thing that I recommend you guys do is make a chart. I'm going to do a chart here, and I'm going to write domain and range. I'm going to write them in alphabetical order. So I'm just going to do D and R, alphabetical order. So domain comes before range. And I know they have to deal with X's and Y's. So on the right side, let me write alphabetical order, X and Y. Now domain, let me put this an equal sign. Domain are all my X values. So what are the possible values of X? That's what domain is. Range, let me put an equal sign, are the possible values of Y. So domain has to deal with X values and range has to deal with Y. So here, identify the domain and the range for each of each. So I look at my domain or my X value. My focus is where is the X? In this case, here, the square root of X minus 3. Now, I know at this point, I cannot deal with negative square roots, right? If I asked you guys, can you give me the square root of a -2? You guys cannot, right? At this point, we cannot deal with square root of negatives. So let's see something. What if I said, let X equal 0? That gives me the square root of -3. Yeah, we cannot do that. So there's values of X that we cannot choose. Now, my question here is, what are the good values of X? What can we choose? So my focus here is, well, my square root, I can deal with X when the square root is 0 or when the square root is positive. Now, what value of X will make X minus 3 equal to 0? Remember, I'm looking at what's the value of X. I'm going to write X is equal to, because I want the square root to equal to 0. So what value of X will give me X minus 3 equal to 0? Well, some people might say, well, X equals 3. Yeah, when X equals 3, the square root will be 0. Now, if X equals anything more than 3, my square root will be a positive value. We can deal with positive square roots. So I'm going to say my domain, if I have to find out what's my domain will be X has to be greater or equal to 3, right? What are the possible values of X? So it has to be greater or equal to 3. Now my range are the possible values of Y. So range are my possible values of Y. Now, the smallest value of X will give me 3/5 times the square root of 0. Now, the square root of 0, I know is 0. 3/5 times 0 is 0. So my smallest value of Y will be 0. And then anything higher than that, so I'm going to say range is going to be Y is greater or equal to 0. Remember, the smallest value of X will give me 0. So range is 0 or more. Okay, let's take a look at question number 56. My domain, my right now focus on the X. So domain, focus on the X. Right now, the square root of X. What's the smallest value of X I can choose? I'm gonna say, well, X has to be greater or equal to 0. All right, if I choose X equal to 0, I can deal with the square root of 0. X equals anything more than 0, yeah, I can deal with that. So my domain is X is greater or equal to 0. Now my range is going to be Y is greater or equal to Now, my smallest variable of x, it gives me 5 plus 1/2 times 0. Right? The smallest value of x is going to give me my smallest value of y. So I have 5 plus 0, right? 1/2 times 0 is 0. So I'm going to say my range in this case is greater or equal to 5. My smallest value of x will give me my smallest value of y. If x equals 0, y equals 5. Another thing that we learned was compound interest. Now for this one, I asked, keep in mind how many times the interest gets compounded in a year. Now for this example, it gets compounded 2 times per year. So there was a formula that I gave you guys. Let me zoom into my formula. Let me zoom in here. And I'm going to write the formula was the amount is equal to principal. Now inside parentheses, I'm going to have 1 plus R over N. Rate divided by the number of times it gets compounded in a year. My parenthesis is going to be to an exponent. My exponent is going to be N times T. So let's take a look. My amount is going to be equal to, here I read, Pranav invests 4,264. That's the principal. 4,264. Inside parentheses, I have 1 plus. Now in the retirement account with a fixed annual interest rate of 3% compounded 2 times per year. Now 3% as a decimal, I write that as 0.03. Remember, you had to move the decimal 2 places to the left. Now, because it gets compounded 2 times a year, I'm going to put a 2 here at the bottom of my fraction. Now, my parentheses goes to N times T. I know it gets compounded 2 times per year, but here it says, what will the account balance be after 19 years? So remember, it gets compounded 2 times a year for 19 years. So 2 times 19, I know is 38. I'm going to do that. Now, do the parentheses first. 0.03 divided by 2 plus 1. So you have, don't do anything to the principal just yet. Just do the parentheses, but you have to divide before you add. So 0.03 divided by 2 plus 1. So that should give you something like 1.015 to the 38. All right, so do the parentheses to the 38. And at the end, you multiply by 4,264. Round your answer to 2 decimal places. My answer here, I get $7,508 with 0.04, so 4 cents. That's it. Now, some cases, our interest are gonna get compounded continuously. Now, remember for that one, I gave you guys the formula. A, the amount at the end, is going to be principal times E. And remember, E is the Euler number, which is about 2.7, to the R times T, rate times time. Okay, so let me fill in my numbers here. My amount is going to equal to, Julio is going to invest $5,610. So that's my principal. 5,610 times E. Like I said, look for the letter E. It's a number. Use your calculator for this. E to the R times T. I know the rate with a fixed annual interest, the rate is 9%. And then he's going to do this for 4 years. 9%, I'm looking at that as 0.09. And I'm going to multiply by 4 because it's 4 years. So I'm going to call that 0.36. 9% for 4 years. Okay. Now remember, you have to do exponents first. So e to the 0.36, whatever you get, you multiply with 5,610. And my result in this case happens to be $8,040 with 98 cents. And lastly, on this unit, we learn how to solve when the variable, right, the letter is part of the exponent. Now, I wish I could write 64 as 4 to the something. In this one, I can't. Let me rewrite this as 4 to the k plus 1 is equal to 4 to the third. Right? 4 to the third is 64. So I wrote 64 as 4 to the something. Now, as soon as I have the bases equal each other, I'm just going to let the exponents equal themselves. So k plus 1 equals to 3. Solve for k. Let me separate them through the equal sign. The plus 1 on the left side, let me move it to the other side as a minus 1. Got to switch the sign. So I get that k is equal to 2. Easy. Now, question number 60. I wish to begin with that I could write 8 as 4 to the something. Now I cannot. So I'm going to change the bases on both sides. My 4 on the left side, let me write that as 2 to the second. Right, 2 to the second is 4. Now, outside of my parentheses as an exponent, I have 1 minus 2x equals. Now, on the right side, 8, let me write that as 2 to the third. Outside of my parentheses, I'm going to have 2x as an exponent. I have to multiply the number inside of the parentheses times the number outside of the parentheses. So I have 2 to the 2 minus 4x equals 2 to the 6x. Now that I have the bases equal themselves, I'm just going to let the exponents equal each other. So I have 2 minus 4x is equal to 6x. Then I'm going to solve for x. I want the x's together. So the minus 4x, let me cancel it out. I'm going to move it to the other side as a plus 4x. Don't forget to switch the sign. So I have that 2 is equal to 10x. I want the x by itself, so let me divide both sides by 10. Now, 2 divided by 10 gives me a decimal. Gotta answer as a whole number or leave it as a fraction. So leave it as a fraction, but at least simplify. 2 over 10, we know we can simplify that as 1 over 5. You're gonna do the 1 backslash 5. Now, if there was a negative sign, don't forget to bring it to the front.